Being a teenager, oh my goodness, during these challenging times, it's already really hard, but it means being the parent of these teenagers can be even harder.
Experts agree that continuing to limit those social interactions and following safety protocols is critical in minimizing the risk of spreading or contracting COVID-19. Having connections and social development is critical as well for teenagers to keep their mental well-being in check. Joining us now, our relationship guru, Dr. Michael Walker, Ph.D. student at, well, I prematurely doctored you. Sorry, almost. You're on the case over at the University of Minnesota, and you, of course, work with young men and women at Minneapolis Public Schools. Good to have you with us, Michael.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it.
Look, this is tricky stuff. I have a 15-year-old and a 12-year-old, and I worry about their mental well-being as much as I do about their kind of medical safety when it comes to COVID.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, during this time of their lives is when they're trying to navigate the world and figure out who are their peer groups. They're trying to get out of the nest of home and trying to become their own people. And so with the COVID putting some restrictions on that, it's kind of difficult for them to navigate this space at this time.
So obviously, Michael, we don't know what's going to happen this fall, if they're going to be able to go back to school and see their friends. But, what should parents do in trying to talk to their teenagers about this and trying to help their teenagers?
Yeah, well, first thing that we should be doing is trying to identify their feelings. So finding times and ways to ask the question to their teens of how they're doing, how they're dealing with what's happening, and to have those conversations and dialogues. Now, for some families, it may be a little awkward if they're not used to talking about feelings, but we have to realize that if we're not talking about them, it doesn't mean that they're not there. They're still there. We're just not acknowledging them and having discussions about them, so they could be festering within our teens.
So how do we work that out, where we get that out of them and get them to share? I mean, it's sometimes challenging to get more than a grunt out of
Fine, school's fine.
Yeah, fine. How's your day?
For sure.
Fine.
I would say the one thing that we have to do as adults is we have to share our insight in how we are feeling during this time. The more that we model that behavior for them, then the likelihood of them following that is high, right? Something that we do in schools. We want to model the behavior that we want our students to see and do, and then they can start to share their feelings with us, and then we can have conversations and discussions about that.
One of the recommendations you have is make individual plans.
For sure. When you think about it, so I have a 14-year-old, and then I have a 12-year-old, but also have a 5 and a 7-year-old. Their needs are going to be completely different during this time. And if we're just even honing in on the teens, you got a 13-year-old who is still pretty much dependent on their families for transportation and those sorts of things, where you have a 17-year-old who's a little bit more mobile, who has a peer group that they have set up. So their needs are going to be completely different. And so how do we set up individual plans to make sure we meet the needs of those individuals as we're going through this time? So that takes a little bit of time, but we can work those things out if we have those dialogues and conversations.
We've kind of struggled a little bit with the family activities early on during the pandemic. It was like the kids were down with it. We'd be watching movies, we'd go on bike rides, and now they don't want to. They don't want to. How do you kind of reignite that?
That is the hardest part. So what we have tried to do in our family is allow our young people to help us with some of those decision-making things. So one thing that we allowed them to do, or one time, is they created an obstacle course in our sidewalk, and so they all put together a design, and then we had to compete against that. The other piece is really to kind of get them to do activities, is try to make it be fun and have them be the creators of those activities. If we can allow them to have some say, some buy-in, it makes it a little bit more easier for them to want to participate. But again, we do have some of those, one of my daughters, she will sit in her room as much as she can if we don't force her to come out of that room.
Yeah.
And they still want to see their friends, though. I mean, is it okay to have some sort of minimal gathering or socially distanced gathering? Because there still is that connection.
Yeah, it definitely is. I mean, obviously things are opening up right now in our state. And so people are being more mobile and going out and visiting. What I would say is, if we're doing some of those small minimum social gatherings, really be intentional about discussing those parameters that you will put in place. So we did have a social gathering here at our space outside in our backyard, and we had let her invite a few friends over, but we kind of set some parameters ahead of time so that, you're going to be social distancing from 6 feet apart, no high-fiving and those sorts of things, but have some dialogues and conversations. But again, that is very difficult because they're young, right? They're young
Right.
and they're going to make
Right.
those mistakes. And so you just got to be mindful that you have the preparation for that. So we had a lot of hand sanitizer there so that they can utilize that once they did come in contact with each other.
Right.
But we also got to realize that sports is opening up as well. And
Right.
so there's some guidelines that they're following with some of the sporting events, which will also give students an opportunity to get some of that social
Yeah.
connection with their peer groups.
Very good.
Right.
Good stuff. Michael, thank you. Yeah. The sports stuff
Yeah, thank you
opening
guys
up
for having me.
has been
Yeah.
very helpful for my youngest,
Right.
for sure.
Thanks, Michael. Yep.